Thanks everybody for joining. We can go ahead and get the party started here. As I mentioned, thank you so much for joining. We're doing the live Q&A with Clarity Consulting. We have a couple of the team members here as we speak. A couple of quick housekeeping items. As always, these folks are actively raising capital on the Net Capital platform. You can go directly to netcapital.com and search Clarity Consulting. I'll also add a link to that into the chat feature here in just a moment. You can also go to netcapital.com and search Clarity Consulting, or you can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/Clarity Consulting. So those are the three options. And again, I'm going to add that into the chat here in just a moment. While there is a chat feature, please do use the Q&A feature built into Zoom. So I know there is that chat feature, but Q&A makes it a lot easier to track all the questions as they come in. We want this to be super interactive, so please do ask those questions. But please do use the Q&A feature rather than the chat. So we can track all of them as they come in and make sure we get to as many of those as possible. Okay, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start the live Q&A here. I think, Steve, you're going to kick us off here. Why don't you go ahead and tell us, before we get into the team and all the other folks on the line here, the fantastic group that you've been able to put together, can you tell us a little bit about what you're building and the problem and the solution that Clarity Consulting provides?
Okay, so we're building a piece of software that'll run inside of industrial control systems. The problem we're talking about is really based around what our FBI director said earlier this year. And I'm gonna quote him right now. And he said, the PRC hackers are targeting our critical infrastructure, our water treatment plants, our electrical grid, our oil and natural gas pipelines, our transportation systems, and the risk that poses to every American requires our attention now. If that isn't a wake up call to do something in this area, I don't know what is. And I think Paul can explain very easily and very quickly what's unique about ours. Why is this so special?
Well, we've turned the model upside down, with 560,000 new computer viruses every day and thousands more of other types of attacks. There's every other product out there in some form or fashion is looking for what hackers are doing, what nation state attackers are doing. And what we've done is the other way around, is we just listen into the plant's electronic facilities, electronic communications, whether it's a water facility or wastewater or power grid, whatever, pipeline, listen into the electronic communications of how it is supposed to run, and we alert or block everything else.
So it feels like a transformational approach. Instead of building a kind of an active trying to keep an eye out on all the new creative attacks that folks are coming up with, you're basically taking the exact opposite approach. What it sounds like is we know what the system is supposed to do. Anything outside of the norm of that actual goal feels like it could be potentially a threat. Am I thinking about that the right way?
It's correct. There's a lot of details in there, but that's correct.
And Brian, at risk of having you on the screen without getting to get a couple of words in too earlier here, why don't you hop on in here and tell us a little bit about what your role is and what you kind of bring to this incredibly unique solution in terms of cybersecurity?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us. Brian Deslitz, I'm the Chief Financial Officer. My background is I was a governmental auditor for a long time, and I learned the ins and outs of these public utility systems that this solution actually comes in to solve the problems for. So I guess really kind of what I bring to the table is we've been developing relationships with our current test base and deployment model in the utility district space. So we're leveraging those relationships that we've built through the financial consulting piece and saying, hey, we also have this additional product that will help protect you from big bad China, and things like that. So it never really made sense kind of how a financial piece and the cyber piece were going to fit together. But as we really go down this road, they're actually very, very complementary to each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now that we have an idea of what this software does, and it's called Constant Guardian, which I think is a fantastic descriptor of what you've built. Steve and Paul, can you give us a little bit about your background, how you got involved with this company, and kind of why you're so excited about what you could do here at Clarity Consulting?
Yeah, Paul, why don't you go first, and I'll bring up the rear here.
Sure. Well, I'm a prolific inventor. I've invented many things for some of the biggest companies in the world: software, hardware, defense, national security as well. But above it all, what really drives me is just the super geek is just taking diverse different technologies and getting to work in new and unexpected ways to solve real problems, real enterprise problems. And for me, the impetus really to get this whole thing going was in 2007 under a different company name. We were nationally ranked on penetrating, doing covert intrusions into facilities. That's electronically, that's physically, that's following people around covertly, and we were recognized at the National Red Team Conference in Washington, D.C. by Sandia National Labs for our groundbreaking methods. And so we started thinking, what could we do to be a world-class team like ours? And so that was the culmination of a career of doing these very things. And, here we are. 12 years later, here we are.
And you're a technologist, right, Paul? You bring. I think your current title is as the CTO here.
Chief Technology Officer, my fifth company. Yes.
Fantastic. And Steve, last but certainly not least, can you tell us a little bit about your background? What are you doing here with Clarity?
Yeah. Well, I could spend all day explaining how we all got together, but I won't. My background was really cybersecurity with a major oil company, Chevron, and 33 years there as a geophysicist. But the last 8 years were spent running their cybersecurity program. And I tell you, when you get in front of an executive and a cybersecurity expert comes in and there's a major incident in an industrial control system area, a chemical plant, and the cybersecurity expert comes in and says, you can't patch your way out of this one. And then the executives all turn at me and say, what are you going to do about it? And I'm sitting there going, well, let's listen and find out. Well, flash forward about 6 years, and I left Chevron, and I'm with Paul and Brian, and it's just an incredible team to be part of. And here, Paul has this great solution that wasn't around 6 years ago, and we're just developing now. And for me personally, it's always about protecting our critical infrastructure, protecting water system, protecting electrical grid, protecting nuclear plants, protecting chemical factories, anything that gives us our basic needs. This was just an incredible opportunity and one that I just couldn't turn down. So I'm really excited about where we're headed with this, where we are right now, and how fast things are moving currently.
Absolutely. Super exciting. And I do want to apologize in advance. I just got back from a conference, and like every time I go to an indoor conference these days, it seems like I come back with just a little bit of a cold. So I feel like I can hear that in the background a little bit. So please bear with me, folks, on the line here. So I'm gonna do a little bit less speaking, but I have a great question queued up for you here for folks at home. Can you tell us a little bit of like what does the actual use case look like from, I know you have several customers already. Can you describe what kind of a general use case for your software application looks like when you come in and you install? And then what does the ongoing engagement with that technology feel like from the customer perspective?
Yeah, Paul, why don't you take that one? Because you've been in these deployments, and I think you have some great stories to tell.
So an ideal customer right now is like a water plant or relatively the smaller facility. We're still scaling up for the larger ones, but our current customers that they're concerned about cybersecurity. They've got a connection to the internet. It may be a degree of air gap, but you've got contractor computers and equipment going back and forth across that air gap, and they've had incidents, or they don't want to have incidents, or they've seen the FBI alert and they're concerned about that. So that's number one. Number two is every one of our customers, both prospective, actual, and prospective, are all having the vendor blame game, where the plant programmers are claiming it's not the issues they're having. All these plants have little small issues. It's not our fault. It must be the plant operators, and the plant operators say it's not us. It must be the equipment vendors, and the equipment vendors saying it's the other two. One of the wonderful things about our product is since we're examining the low-level electronic communications that make the plant work, we know who's right and who's wrong. So the incredibly detailed diagnostics actually are proving to be actually a bigger sales point very unexpectedly than the product itself. And I guess the third is our ability to do error correction, not just to simply alert problems, but lightning fast, in less than thousands of a second, correct problems before they can even become problems. And I'd give one more is upcoming feature set that's coming down, all included, is our command replacement. When there's equipment failures on the network that normally cause hours or days of downtime, our tool just steps in and continues to run the plant normally, no downtime. So that's the typical use case right there.
And that's fantastic. I imagine if I was running a manufacturing plant, for example, or kind of a supply plant, or even like you mentioned, a water processing or processing plant, downtime seems like the one of the worst case scenarios. Am I thinking about that the right way?
Yes, a lot of them heavily do not want downtime. All kinds of things could happen. For every type of plant, it's different, but they try relentlessly, rigorously to avoid that.
In these industrial control systems, there's a model called the CIA triad. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And for industrial control systems, these critical infrastructure, availability, no downtime is number one. And part of that also is safety incidents. Okay, if we can prevent anybody from getting hurt out there, that becomes also very critical for these
Mm-hmm.
plants. So making sure things operate as they should is job one for these folks for safety purposes and uptime purposes.
That's super cool. And you mentioned replacement. So if some underlying process fails, your system knows that at 10:03 p.m. X trigger switch is supposed to happen, and at 10:05 it's supposed to stop. And you can be able to recreate those processes if something is falling behind. And I think that's really exciting, the idea that you don't have to wait for some creative new solution to try to get embedded in your technology or try to get bypast your firewalls. You really have to say, instead of looking for the negative, you're really looking for the positive. Let's just stay on the correct path, not try to worry about, if we're deviating on the wrong side of the path here. The value add seems incredibly obvious. I think that's fantastic. For those who are unfamiliar, can you talk about how big of a market size is this? Critical infrastructure, that feels like overwhelmingly large. Can someone talk about how big the market size is for a solution like this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I mean, what we're talking about here, the cyber market in general is about 150 billion dollar market. Okay, in general, and it's growing, at average about a 13% compounded annual growth rate a year. So it's just getting bigger and bigger. The operational technology market, which is a niche where industrial control systems run, that's about a $20 billion market. That's once again growing at very fast paces.
Mm-hmm.
So between those two numbers, we're in the billions. Now, our personal market that we're focused in on right now are water systems. And there's about 155,000 or so public water systems just in the United States. Add another 16,000 wastewater systems. It's quite a big market to tap into there. And once again, I'm only talking United States numbers here. There's water systems all over the world that we could potentially protect.
And it seems what's so special about this is just it feels like almost like a human right to have access to these systems. And it seems like it's the most vulnerable populations when something goes wrong that are affected disproportionately for when these things go poorly. So it feels like you're really kind of protecting all folks, even at a global level, but really when things go really poorly, those most vulnerable seem to be impacted the worst. Can you talk a little bit with this massive market size? What does the ballpark of the revenue model look like? And I know you have several clients already, paying clients, which is fantastic. Congratulations on that traction. Can you talk a little bit, kind of, you can do broad strokes, you can get a little bit more granular if you'd like to, but tell us a little bit about your business model. How does Clarity Consulting make money from this software?
Brian, why don't you handle that?
Yeah, you're gonna make me talk about that part.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Brian.
It's the good part, isn't it?
It's Hey, this is why we do it. This is why we do it. So the plan that we have to generate revenues, we're going to be selling an annual subscription model, and there may be an opportunity in the future for licensing the product down the road. We've kind of had a little bit of discussion about that, but we don't want to put the cart before the horse. But our current pricing structure really depends on the complexity of the system where we're doing the deployment. For example, a water system that we keep referencing is probably the easiest thing, the simplest in forms of technology to deploy in. So that cost is relatively low compared to, say, we do a big chemical plant or a refinery where it's going to be a much more complicated deployment and setup process. So that's how we're doing it right now. And as far as pricing, I don't know if you want me to get into pricing, but our annual subscription model right now is 45,000 per year per
And
license.
And I think that's an important detail because you talk about having a handful of paying clients already, but this isn't a small a chunk of change. This is it's a pretty sizable annual contract that you get for each of these paying clients. I think that's fantastic for investors, potential investors to know. So congratulations on already getting some folks in there. And I know it sounds like you have a pretty substantial pipeline of folks that are interested in the solution as well.
Yes. Yes.
You guys, we're talking about some of the paying clients. There's also some other really exciting successes to date. My understanding is you have granted patents and a couple, three patent pending. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other successes to date, whether that's from a IP standpoint or from a development standpoint? Let's talk a little bit about what you've been able to accomplish in just the last couple of years of building out this solution.
Well, there's been a number of breakthroughs because a lot of the protocols used in industrial process control are obfuscated or poorly documented, not documented. So we've had multiple breakthroughs into faster and faster ways to get our product deployed, to understand the gibberish, you might say. Um, Finding use case applications has been easy. Customers light up and then say we could use it for this or that, and so we keep adding. I think most of our breakthroughs have to be in the area of speed. We have from the beginning strived for about a 1/10,000th of a second reaction time to most issues, and smaller things about 1/1000th of a second. So we're actually hitting that. We're actually better than that. And so a lot of tight code writing, pretty proud of that. There's some innovations coming down imminently that we have yet to, as soon as these patents are filed, we can discuss more. But there's probably been about 20 significant breakthroughs that will be a story of their own one day when the right time comes.
No, that sounds great. And some things we just can't disclose. We definitely don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you giving a little bit of flavor of what some of the exciting things. But that sounds lightning fast. And I imagine some of these critical infrastructure, speed is one of the most important features.
Yes, yes, lightning fast, real time. Again, multiple breakthrough methods that even people with long backgrounds in the IT side, where they're supposed to understand this, to go, how did you guys think of this? How did you think of that? And again, it's a whole story begging to be told one day. So
That's fantastic. Another question coming in from the team here or from the attendees. What's included with the annual subscription? What about the equipment or computer malfunctions? I think it's a great question.
Yes, and the answer is it's all included.
yes,
When we say
everything.
45,000, that includes the hardware, that includes annual support, that includes updates, that includes installation.
Yes.
I think that's what's making us very appealing to these folks.
Mm-hmm.
Very often when a vendor comes in and says, "Oh, it costs you $10,000," they end up spending several $100,000 installing the doggone thing. Nope, this is all inclusive. So we feel
Everything.
like it's a very competitive price, very fair price, and some of these utility districts don't have huge budgets, and so this is very helpful for them, and so that's why we think this is a great price point for them.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding is that there's even some offsite, a little bit of remote support. Is that something that's kind of included here to where if something is going wrong, I think if I remember correctly, last time we spoke, there's an ability to kind of try to kind of intervene real time if something doesn't automatically
Mm-hmm.
get triggered. Is that built into the system as well for that price point?
Well, Eric, you've asked a fantastic question. Actually, Constant Guardian number one stores all the facilities traffic, every communication in every direction, and definitely we offer a year, but the client themselves can archive it indefinitely and go back and retroactively solve problems or investigate failures or whatever later on. Yes, the product itself is supported. We don't do investigations on behalf of the client. That would obviously be a separate thing, but all the product support, the failures, the hardware, training, helping them to understand, set things up, all that is included for one number, one price.
Oh man, people are going to be able to go back and do some really impressive things with that data over
Yes.
time. I
Yes.
imagine. Wow, that seems like a whole nother value add. That's incredible.
Yes.
To go back and be able to retroactively determine some of the critical system failures. Wow, that's
Yep.
impressive. Love it. The attendees are engaging. Thank you so much, team. The Q&A is going off here. So, can we talk a little bit about deployment? How long is the average deployment of the product for let's say for one of the vendors that you've worked with in the past? Great question.
So right now it's running about 1 month. from the time we actually install the device, which takes about 2 hours to do within the facility. It takes about 1 month to actually bring it online. That is getting faster and faster. Some of the remarkable breakthroughs we talked about are in the very area we anticipate at this time next year will be down to 1 day. The subscription year, by the way, does not start until the product is operational. Again, we try to be as fair as possible in everything we do.
Once live, that's when the fee clock starts rolling. That's really exciting.
Exactly, when it's operational.
And then is the annual subscription fee a per site or per company cost? That's an interesting one. A little bit of a nuance
Yeah,
there.
it's within these industrial control systems. There's usually what we call an HMI, human machine interface, which is just a computer and a monitor, kind of monitors this, and there may be one or two of these hooked up, and they go through a network switch, and that's what connects it to the plant in the background. So really, it's a price per, if you will, per switch, per network switch.
Yeah.
So for these smaller plants, that's one switch. For other ones, the more devices we have to install, for a big refinery or chemical plant, obviously it's going to be a whole lot more that they have.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And somebody also mentioned, you mentioned starting with water plants. Is there a time frame for the product to be expanded to other industries? And if you were to imagine, what are some of the kind of the next most likely industries that you're planning to expand into?
Yeah, the water systems, I will just say, I mean, we've seen notices come out from the EPA, from the Texas Department of Public Safety, mentioning that water systems really need to do something, that they're vulnerable. So that's really our focus at the start. So for the next probably 18 months, that's going to be our big focus. And once we nail that down, which we're very close to already, then we'll start expanding out to other things. And if you go up the gradation of complication, if you will, we could, next go to dams or power grids. And the tail end of this are those chemical plants and refinery plants that have just huge networks of computers. So, and there's everything in between. So absolutely, we'll start going out there. But in our discussions with large companies right now, they definitely want to see something working already before they bring it into these more complicated systems. So I'd say within 18 months, we'll start expanding out to much larger areas.
I'm so glad to hear that. I'm not gonna lie, the vulnerability of the power grids actually keeps me up at night a little bit. There are some pretty good dystopian films on that. So the sooner we can get to that place, the sooner I'll feel a little bit more comfortable. So thank you so much for working on that. Um, we're about halfway through our scheduled programming, so I'm gonna use this as a reminder. We're on the line here with the team from Clarity Consulting. They have a super exciting product called Constant Guardian that's in the cybersecurity space. They're actively raising capital on the Net Capital platform, and that's why we're doing this live Q&A. So thank you so much for the attendees for joining and asking their questions. I'm adding a link to that offering page back into the Zoom chat there. You can also go to netcapital.com and search Clarity Consulting, or you can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/Clarity Consulting Corporation, where you can review the offering page, learn more, and if you're so inclined, you too can invest and own a small piece of the future here. So thank you so much for the panelists sharing today. And I wanted to make sure I added a link back into the chat there for anybody who joined after we got the party started here. So digging right back in, and thank you so much again for these questions that are coming. I love it. Let's keep that going. We want to keep this as interactive as possible. We're here for the potential investors and your questions. We talked a little bit about past successes and the value add and kind of what your solution is. We talked a little bit about the competitive landscape, and we did talk about your differentiator a little bit about focusing on what's going right and how to make sure that the right thing keeps happening. But are there other folks in this space that are trying to do something similar? And then we'll go into a little bit more follow-on questions from there. But what is then you have to name, you don't have to name companies by any means, but can you give us an idea of what other players in the space are doing and how you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, typically the players in this space, and there's multiple companies that do this, and there's some that are very good at industrial control system protection. Okay, I'm no doubt, but what the tack they're taking is one, and this is important. Let's have a good asset inventory of everything inside of the industrial control system. We're not touching that. There's companies that do that quite well. Okay, and then there's other companies that do network intrusion prevention. In other words, firewalls, things like that that prevent bad things from getting in to the network. Once again, a lot of companies do that well, but as Paul mentioned at the very beginning, they have to know what they're looking for. Okay, and then there's stuff that once again it's called anomalous behavior detection, and that's looking once again for areas where okay, we've seen these actors, these bad guys do certain things, so now we're trying to detect that. And so most of this, once again, is they're looking for things that they know about already. So I'm not aware of anybody right now that's doing what we're doing, and that's what makes it very unique. We are not looking for the bad. We don't have to look for the bad things, and this may be sacrilegious, but I'm going to say it anyway. This could be a very big disruptor
Yeah.
to the industry. It really could, because all of a sudden, knowing what the bad guys are doing for companies like water systems and other companies doesn't become very important anymore. Now, for our government, yes, they need to understand that. Don't get me wrong. There's areas where that's important, but for your average company, all of a sudden, they don't need to worry about that. There's a lot of threat intelligence teams out there for these companies that, frankly, may not be needed as much as they are today. So that whole industry becomes we could flip it on its side quite a bit.
Yeah, it feels like an absolute novel approach. Really kind of not just one more keeping an eye on things that we think are bad actors. Because again, these bad actors are incredibly creative. They're nuanced. They're constantly iterating. Almost feels like a virus that like once you learn how to stop the virus, the next iteration of the virus is already here. Instead of trying to kind of whack-a-mole these external bad actors, the idea of focusing on the one singular source of truth, the correct thing. I mean, it's so novel, but at the same time, it almost feels like obvious. That's super exciting. It feels like
You've got it. Could I add on the vendor space?
Please.
Soon to throw out names. And in fact, this is so new, it happened just before the conference, but we have a vendor that manufactures HMIs express interest in partnering for different reasons. And so we'll go through that. We have another one. Steve may want to throw a hint out, but they use innovative hardware to do protection. Complements ours 100%. And so any kind of vendors that get at the root causes, we probably would partner with as it's mutually beneficial. I think the excitement of these vendors is this is clearly going to change the future. We've got to get on the board early and risk getting left behind.
Absolutely, absolutely. More great questions coming in, and you can be as kind of specific or as broad as you'd like to with this. But about a 1 month installation, and obviously working towards shrinking that time frame. What is the estimated cost of installation?
The cost.
The cost of the install. I think that would be for y'all. But I mean, again, if you want to be, however,
Yeah.
However,
Ryan, you have to tell them it's just the most shocking thing. We have to go round and round with our customers with the same thing.
Yeah, just earlier this week. The cost of installation it's all included. It's in the annual subscription fee.
Everything.
All the hardware,
Everything's included.
deployment cost,
Everything.
computers, everything's included.
Yeah.
I mean, is that question maybe looking for the profit margin on this?
I like your answer better because I think the idea of getting at that maybe we're not going to answer that question anyway. So I think I like your guys' answer. But if you do want to share on if the question were what is the cost to the company for installation, I'm not sure if you have anything you'd like to share on that.
Well, we can say very easily that the hardware itself runs in the neck of the $3,000 to $4,000. Okay, that's how much the hardware costs, and then obviously we put time into to installing. But Paul already described, it's a month-long process that we're going to get down to a day. So what's your charge per hour or whatever, you can figure that one out. So those type of things are coming along, and like I said, we'll continue to reduce that cost. We buy in bulk. Guess what? That hardware costs go down. No, all these things that weigh in on that.
I'm hearing healthy margins. Thanks for that, Steve.
Yeah.
More questions. So great. So great. I love the interaction here. So when you say water systems, do you mean freshwater treatment systems or wastewater sewage treatment systems?
Both. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Great
And I
work.
think both are super impactful. Go ahead, Paul.
Really anything that's industrial process control automation. You've got some giant HVAC installations that could be hacked. We know for a fact some of them are very worried about that. And everything Steve mentioned before, what's going to happen is that as our profit margins can, not profit margins grow, excuse me, as revenue continues to grow, we're going to plow that back into more and more editions. This is the inaugural edition of Constant Guardian. We've got additional patent filings and technology going way out. Again, it's, look back and say, you guys saw all this from the beginning. We did. We absolutely did.
I love that. And I mean, this is a really good question. Actually, I think I thought about this when we got to speak earlier, Paul. Will the government be requiring water treatment plants to have some type of security like the Constant Guardian product? That's a fun question.
Well, actually, this gets into regulations, right? And I tell you, early in my cybersecurity career, I was like, we don't need more regulations. But as I get further and further along, sometimes regulations are the only thing that prompts people to do something. Okay.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it's quite lagging. So the U.S. government actually made a ploy about 4 years ago to regulate, actually come out with regulations. It failed. A lot of the states are saying, no, we can handle this. You're invading our rights. We don't want to do this, so on and so forth. My understanding, I read it in the Wall Street Journal just a few days ago, is that, or it wasn't the Wall Street Journal, it was another publication, that they're going to try to make another run at putting regulations in place. That it's not going to specifically say install Constant Guardian. Trust me,
Mhm.
they're very vendor agnostic when it comes to these regulations, but they are going to require people to start protecting them and making and have the ability to come in and audit and look and make sure that that's what's occurring. Frankly, the nuclear industry does that already. So it's just a matter of time before other things catch up with that.
I think what's so exciting about the all-included pricing is that when you see a relatively small figure like that, you could imagine that when the risk is so high and the cost of if something does go wrong is so high, and then you include the probability of that to occur, it does seem like eventually you can get to a point where it's just flat out unreasonable, just legally unreasonable not to do something like this. And again, like you said, I don't think they'll say, hey, you have to go to Constant Guardian, but the idea of like being able to not do anything might be deemed wholly unreasonable. And I can see that being a really big win for your company and other players in the space.
Yeah, we can put some dollars on this. You can't put a dollar on the life value of life, right? I mean, you just can't do that. But when we one of our first installs, he's loving it. Why? Because it's protecting $5 million worth of pumps that are no longer manufactured,
Mhm.
and at 45,000 a year, that's a bargain. Okay. So and that just doesn't even include the life safety issues of bad water or wastewater treatments overflowing or anything like that. So when you get into other places like power grids and you get into refining and so on, once again there's life safety issues at play here, and we've seen attacks that were going after life safety systems within these industrial control systems.
Mhm.
So all that's very important to work through all this. So there's definitely a dollar value on this. Think of a chemical plant or a refinery that is producing oil or products, byproducts. They go 24/7. If they're down for a day, there's lost revenue there. So, there's all these other things that weigh into this that become very important. But probably, and you hit on it, the most critical part of this is the safety of people, the basic life essentials that we're protecting. Somebody doesn't get the water, the electricity, can't power a hospital, things like that. That's a problem.
It is heartbreaking to see that it seems like they are attacking, like you said, the critical infrastructure, hospital systems. The most vulnerable folks are the ones that would be impacted the most in a negative way. So absolutely fantastic. And yeah,
Eric,
you can't put a dollar on fines. Yes, please go ahead, Paul.
to illustrate what Steve just said, last night, Brian and I were actually at the municipal utility district board meeting. And here is what one of the lead plant operator actually said. He was talking to the board in this executive session to consider our product. And we're describing all the things we have here and more and showing some material. And so the board looked at the lead plant operator a little confused and they said, what protects us from mistakes? There was a pause. Operator said, nothing. If I have a sleepless night or, the baby keeps us up and it's happened and there's nothing stopping me from typing, and he named a couple of values. I mean, that would be very damaging to our plant. What I like is Constant Guardian instantly in alert mode flags you instantly, cell phone, emails, texts, alarms, all those things. Or if you have error correction turned on, which is an included option, instantly corrects it. There's no problem. I mean, that is unbelievable. On top of the cyber stuff, he says, we have to have this product.
You're even protecting against good old fashioned user error, which let's just be frank here. That's got to be a whole nother massive basket of some of the shortcomings that we have.
Yeah.
This is like, I'm personally accountable for this. This is a user error solution as well.
Yes.
And a sabotage. I mean, even intentional sabotage, it will not let you do it. It doesn't care who you are. Once it's turned into enforce mode, it will not even let the operators with passwords to everything. They can't sabotage it, or the programmers and so forth. I mean, if you want to change some things, there's a procedure to do that they could do or we could do. That's just takes seconds. But basically, these people start looking at this and say, like, this is crazy not to have it. Just what you said.
Dang, disgruntled employees, bad actors, mistakes, which I think is probably the biggest shortcoming. It's just good old fashioned mistakes. Oh wow, all
Spy
sorts of them.
devices, even vampire taps. I mean, again, national security background, you can take a vampire tap and be done this and actually inject commands into the Ethernet cable instantly. Same thing. It is the most amazing thing. I mean, we've invented it, but it's even amazing to us to see it actually working as designed.
It's amazing. That's incredible. More great questions coming in. And this actually, I'm going to give some context for this one. Somebody asked, will there be application for Constant Guardian in AI computer data centers? And for those who are unfamiliar, we just saw the data that came out. 1/3 of all of venture funding last quarter went to AI applications. So there's a clear emphasis on artificial intelligence right now. Do you imagine there's a Constant Guardian application for computer data centers in the AI space? That's a good question.
Remember, we talked about a long roadmap. Our patent filing is exhaustive. It includes that application as well as embedded systems being embedded on processor chips. Every possible use case is an exhaustive patent. Yes, we have an extensive list of, as I mentioned before, we plan to dominate the industry in one way or the other down the road. Yes.
I tend to save this question, but somebody asked it, so I'm going to go ahead and move it all the way up. I like to ask, outside of money, outside of cash, how else can folks help you? But this one took a little bit of a twist on that. What types of investors could be helpful to guide the company? And are you looking for strategic partnerships? And if so, what types of relationships would be helpful from a strategic standpoint to help you get to the next level? So somebody wants to support even beyond capital here.
Well, that's a pretty loaded question. So I'll start at the beginning. And typical investors, how they can help, short of money, which is very important right now as we try to scale. But it would be one, spreading the word. Two, getting us in front of people who this could help, which is anybody who's running industrial control systems. Getting those contacts becomes very important. As you, Eric, I'm sure very well aware, and any investor, these cold calls are tough. If you get a warm handoff to somebody, that is so huge. Somebody said, "I heard something really good. Please talk to these folks." That's huge in our book. So that would be very helpful. Moving on to the strategic relationships, I just say there, like for instance, I can't be any more sincere when I say we're out to protect these life essentials. Okay, that's very important to us, and we do not protect everything in there, and that's why we're partnering. We're already getting ready to sign a strategic partnership with somebody who can help protect the HMI itself. We're protecting everything behind that, make sure the operations are running. But if a piece of ransomware comes in and knocks that computer out, it's going to take a while to build that up and so on. Well, they have something that protects that. So we're looking at partnerships where we can complement each other. And those are very important strategic relationships to make sure that you can protect the whole plant. I can give you an example of Colonial Pipeline, where it shut down a lot of gas flow to the East Coast. Prices spiked. People were waiting in line for gas. And at the end of the day, that did not attack the industrial control system. It attacked their IT computers, but they weren't sure how far it went. And so they had to shut down their industrial control systems. Well, if they had our product, they wouldn't have to do that because they would have been assured that they were running properly. But on top of that, you still have all these computers that are knocked out that we aren't protecting. So you want to partner with these people so you get the complete solution.
I love that. At the end of the day, you can only cover so much with your solution, and if other folks are helping, kind of protect your blind side, so to speak, that could be a real kind of a natural strategic partnership there. Great question. I think that's a fantastic
Yeah,
answer
Paul, I
there.
think Paul has something to add to that.
Yeah, please come in, Paul.
And yeah, Steve, right on. Just to avoid any confusion, let's say your HMI is encrypted by ransomware. It could happen. Yes, it's down. It could be down for 2 days. A lot of the vendors, it takes a reaction time. But our new upcoming optional command replacement feature, it's included at the same price. But if you turn it on, what it does command replacement. If a configurable delay goes by, let's say 0.5 seconds, half of a second, it just goes on supplying the same commands that it would normally see the HMI supply. So the plant continues running normally. Now, we're not going to be in the business of making HMI. We're not competing in that area. This allows you to gain control of the plant. You can change set values, but again, we're not an HMI. It's so that now you can remove that malware, hopefully patch it, clean it, have good cyber hygiene, use other vendors' products to better protect that HMI. But in the meantime, Constant Guardian is constant. It keeps right on running.
That's fantastic. And for those who are unfamiliar, I think you're referring to the human machine interface when you're talking about HMI
Yes,
there, right? Which is kind
that's
of like
right.
that protects the, sorry, go ahead,
Glorified
Paul.
computers. Yeah, there you go.
Protects data by converting into kind of an unreadable format using like
Mhm.
those secret keys, for those who are unfamiliar with that terminology. Um, that is so great. And again, we're getting towards the end here, so they're so grateful for all these questions coming in. Please keep them coming. I love the engagement from the attendees here. We talked a little bit about future patent pending. What would you imagine the future looks like here? We talked about past successes. We talked about future industries that you'd like to expand to, including electrical grid and those applications. Are there other technologies slash products in the pipeline that you're able to share about at this point in time?
Steve?
I'm going to let you answer that, Paul. I'm
Well,
worried about trade secrets and what all we can reveal
yeah,
right now.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm going to let
As much
Paul
yeah,
answer that.
well,
yeah,
we'll
what
give
you
a
can
hint.
answer. Yeah.
We picked the industrial control market because it's vastly easier than its industrial process control. Yes, it's involved. Yes, there's some cool technology, particularly with the speed, but ultimately it's what I personally would call trivial from a lifetime of working on enterprise, the world's biggest data centers. And so that's near to our heart. We have a wealth of technologies. We do have another granted patent that ties us very nicely into that environment. But this is the bread and butter that will fuel us for the immediate future, like Steve said before. At some point, we're going to be able to launch some very surprising things in the enterprise market. I said there's a roadmap. Enterprise is near and dear to our heart, but that will have to wait because that's much more complex. The R&D cost is quite a bit higher, and so this is fueling all that. We have a lot of customers in front of us all the way around to take on.
Focusing on the main thing right now, deploying those applications, increasing the speed with which you can deploy, and
That's
that
right.
feels like a great use of your time at this point. But some exciting updates on the horizon. It sounds like.
Mhm.
Don't want to get ahead of ourselves, and I always like to do a big, massive caveat that the future is inherently uncertain and speculative. So I'm going to put that out there again. The future is inherently uncertain and speculative. But if we were to think about some of the things that we'd like to accomplish, or hope to accomplish, or intend to accomplish, can we talk a little bit about exit strategies? Is there M&A activity in this space? Are we thinking uplifting to kind of public markets? Do you have anything in mind in terms of exit strategies here? And again, very uncertain, getting ahead of ourselves.
Our intent is to stay private. We think the market is there to sustain this and make us a big corporation. Okay. Yes, we're starting small, but I think you're seeing the beginnings of something very large. I'm very excited about that. So, how does an investor make money then? Well, it'll be primarily through dividends, and that's our primary way of working through this. And then I think there's a strong possibility we'll do some share buybacks down the road. Okay, so but that's going to be our primary method. Now, being speculative and all here, if somebody came offered us a lot for this, we'd certainly listen. But our I would just be very clear. Our intent is to stay private and to grow as a company. We think the market's that big and the innovations we have are that good that we can do that.
Thank you so much for that. And again, big old caveats. And I think that's awesome, especially with something that's so important and relevant to cybersecurity and national security. Maybe there is some real value in staying private, not overly disclosing. Maybe the cancer of short-termism is not the goal for something like this for the public markets have. So nothing wrong with some good old-fashioned dividends. And that's fantastic. And so as we're wrapping up here, can we do a quick kind of for the folks that trickled in late? Can you do a quick, kind of re-emphasizing some of the really cool things, the command replacement, how this is more than a cybersecurity tool? Can you do a little bit of deal highlights, and then we're going to wrap up in these last couple of minutes with kind of closing remarks, which will be why is now the perfect time to go to netcapital.com and invest in Clarity Consulting. So if we can do a quick reminder, maybe that's you, Paul, again. Talk a little bit about how this is just much more than a cybersecurity tool, and talk a little bit about that command replacement. And then maybe we can switch back over to you, Steve, and talk about why now's the right time to invest in Clarity Consulting.
Thank you. So there's many threats on many different vectors against industrial process control facilities like water plants, dams, pipelines, electric power grid. Some of them are electronic over the internet or through vendor equipment or outright sabotage. Some come through the human element, the operators themselves making mistakes, equipment errors. And so rather than trying to keep up with the blizzard of possible ways in, we figured out that we just simply, our tool literally plugs in and listens to the electronic command and control that runs all these facilities or pipelines or the power grid, uses that or the original pristine programming, if that's available, either way, same result. Once the learning is complete, it sets about enforcing that logic. Real world test, it is fantastic, works quite a bit better than even we hoped it would, and our expectations already were high. And so that's what that does. Now, the benefits are many. It will stop even targeted attacks where a foreign intelligence agency makes a direct attack against a facility with brand new malware created specifically for that plant, which means it's not going to be detected anyway. Our tool doesn't detect the attack. We don't even look for attacks. It just protects the logic. Any deviance by anyone, whether it's a spy device, or I don't care if it's Vladimir Putin himself, it doesn't matter who the person, what's doing the attack, any deviance from that expected network traffic is either alerted that that mode's on or instantly corrected in less than 1,000th of a second, right? If the whole network fails, it has command replacement to continue running it. There's a lot of more moving pieces, a lot of details. This isn't the forum for the technology at that depth, but we have all that available to us. The other benefits would be is protection against deliberate sabotage from the inside by disgruntled former employees who feel like you didn't pay me enough or you cut me loose for the wrong reason. It provides a wealth of detailed diagnostic features like nothing's ever been able to do before. By listening to all sides of the communications and replies and listing it and color coding it and saving it all in readable formats, not proprietary. So again, you don't need us to do this. Just a wealth of investigation material to not just help protect it, but to optimize it, make process better, improve production. I mean, who knows how many use cases will come out of this. More and more, I think companies will approach us to partner or on their own do that. A whole ecosystem is going to spring up. Does not require hardware changes of any kind of existing equipment to protect them. That's another big feature. It is tamper-proof against failure. And by the way, our device is not targetable. There's some people listening that would challenge that. You need to understand how our technology works. Again, this is not the right forum for that, but we can back that up in spades. And so we operate the short versions. We operate off a span port or tap We don't have an IP address on the network. We're not addressable. We're not attackable, but yet we can defend. All this was by design.
Including user error, not just disgruntled, but just good old fashioned accents. Accident,
Just
excuse me.
day-to-day error of any types. Equipment failures, lightning strikes, all of them, same thing.
Can't even get over that part. That's transformational. That's so much. That's so great. Thank you so much, Paul. And with our last couple of minutes, Steve or Brian, can you talk a little bit about why now is the perfect time to go to netcapital.com and invest in Clarity Consulting?
Well, let me start and I'll let Brian finish. But really, why now? I wish I had this cute story that we built all this in a garage and, you know, we were in t-shirts and shorts and all of a sudden. It's not that quite cute, but we're at the very early stages of this. You want to get in early on a company that has just tremendous potential to grow. Now is the time. We're looking to scale. So we need the dollars to scale. Another reason to invest now. And frankly, the share price that you see on Net Capital is not going to go down. It's only going to go up. So once again, now is the time to get in. So if you're interested in protecting critical infrastructure, interested in protecting life's essential needs, and you think we need to act now, now is the time. And trust me, you see what's going on in the world today and how a lot of nation states, political things are going on where, frankly, these nation states are using cyber attacks, attacking critical infrastructure, not only for monetary gain, but also for wartime things. You know, let's shut down the network and now we can move our tanks in. Things like that are going on all the time. And it's only going to get bigger. And people often ask, why is that? Well, frankly, when people do cyber attacks, it's very hard to nail down exactly who's doing it. There's a lot of ways of obfuscating what's going on. So it's becoming a tool of choice, if you will, to do these types of things. So once again, if you're worried about protecting life's basic needs, now's the time. If you're worried about getting in early, now's the time. And if you want to help us scale, now's the time.
Perfect, perfect. And the audience is demanding an encore. Brian, closing remarks. Your last couple of thoughts about right now is the right time to invest.
Why are you going to make me follow that?
I know you had the repetition and everything. I got goosebumps.
I can
Good
sign
luck,
it.
Brian.
I can summarize it. Now's the time. No, yeah. No, I think that Steve made some really good points, and anybody that picks up Steve mentioned the Wall Street Journal earlier. You look at any newspaper publication, magazine, online article, once a week, you'll see that hey, they're trying to attack a tank farm in South Texas, or in North Texas, you've got, the Chinese are taking credit for overflowing water plants. The problem that we're facing right now is that it's an ongoing battle. And I think that for the general public, like myself, remember, I was a finance guy, I wasn't a technology guy. So I learned a lot of this stuff, every day as we go along as well. But the average Joe is not really aware of what our adversaries are doing in our public utilities for, in our critical infrastructure. I'll say it that way. I'm learning that, they can lay dormant, and at the flip of a switch, they can start turning things off or messing things up. And it doesn't sound like, it sounds like most of the attacks that are happening in the space that we're trying to protect. I know that there's other ways to get in, and we're working on patents and technology for that too. But I think it's just an ongoing battle, and it's a constant back and forth between, for lack of a better term, between good and evil, between our way of life and them trying to sabotage our way of life. And I think that, I think it's just a race to get something out there to really protect our way of life.
Yeah. No, thank you. Hey, we did a great job, Brian. That was a good follow-up.
Yay!
That was tough. That was a tough task, but I think you did a great job. So we're already a little bit over here. So thank you so much for everybody for joining. Thank you so much for the attendees with those fantastic questions. I think you did a great, incredible job keeping it interactive. As I mentioned at the beginning and in the middle, this company is actively raising capital on the Net Capital platform. So I just added a link back into the chat feature for Zoom. I can go to netcapital.com and search Clarity Consulting. You can click the link that I just added into the chat feature, or you can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/Clarity Consulting Corporation, where you can review the offering page, you can learn more about the opportunity, and you too can invest in this company. So Thank you so much for our attendees. Thank you so much for our panelists sharing the good word about what you're building here. And we look forward to seeing you on the next live Q&A. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Eric.
Oh, you know what's so funny? I should actually mention super quickly before we wrap up. As always, this has been recorded. Thank you so much. We were having a little space error there. So I'm adding a link into that back into the chat here. You can go to Net Capital YouTube account where you'll be able to see this shortly. It'll be posted there. Or you can go to YouTube and search for Clarity Consulting. That'll be available. So I'm adding a link into our YouTube account into the chat there. That's the last little bit there. So again, if you missed something or if you know somebody who was unable to attend that might be interested in learning more about this, the link is there in the chat, or you can go to YouTube, search for the Net Capital channel, and this will be uploaded relatively shortly. So go ahead and check out anything that you missed and go ahead and share that generally. We want to get the word out there about this opportunity. That is the final little bit. Thanks so much for everybody for joining, and we'll see you next time.
All right, super. Thanks. Bye.